CIRA, SafeWork and icare. CIRA is the State Insurance Regulatory Authority and it regulates a number of statutory insurances such as compensation and CTP insurance, just to name a few. SafeWork New South Wales is the work, health and safety regulator. And then there is icare. And one of icare's key roles is to administer the Workers Compensation Scheme amongst other insurance schemes. One thing to note is that in New South Wales, third parties will tender for various claim services in the scheme. So when you get a workplace injury and a workers' compensation claim, this may be managed by one of those 6 claim service providers that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen there. These providers manage workers' compensation claims on behalf of icare, and icare manages all the premium and policy-related functions in-house. So Adam, over to you. Why don't you now explain who needs a workers' compensation policy and what that policy provides?
Thanks, Hux. Yeah, I think as most people on the call would already be aware, you're required to take out a workers' compensation policy if you have employees who are deemed workers under New South Wales workers' compensation legislation. And Hux, you'll discuss deemed workers in more detail soon.
Yeah.
A workers' insurance policy provides an employer with the coverage in the event that any of their employees suffer a work-related illness or injury. And this can be psychological or physical. And I think it's important to note that psychological claims play a bigger part in our scheme these days. Workers' compensation provides several benefits that can be accessed should a worker be injured in the workplace. And some of these include the weekly compensation benefits, which are generally reimbursed to the employer, medical and hospital expenses to ensure appropriate and timely treatment is provided to the injured worker, and a focus on getting treatment approvals if required. Rehabilitation services, which can assist with establishing suitable duties and/or return to work programs. Certain personal items can also be covered. These have been may have been damaged due to the incident. Example being some ripped clothing or broken spectacles, etc. And lump sum payments or death benefits, which obviously relates to serious type injuries. Hey Hux, can you please explain a few different employer and worker categories, as it can sometimes be confusing for employers as to who is covered and who isn't in their policy?
Yeah, good. So we'll start with the most basic of employer categories, and we'll start with sole traders and partners. So as a sole trader or a partner in a partnership, you're not actually covered by the policy itself. Only the employees of that partnership or that sole trader are covered under a workers' compensation policy. So if you are a sole trader or a partner in a partnership, you can seek some form of coverage through a personal accident or income protection insurance policy, which will cover you, probably in the workplace, but also it may cover you outside of work as well, depending on the type of cover that you take. And you'll need to take that via a insurance broker or contact an insurance agent to take out that cover. It isn't compulsory. We might get into some different categories out of now of deemed workers, because there are so many different categories of workers, and this can be also, as you mentioned, can be quite confusing. And we'll start with those that definitely are a deemed worker, which is shown on the left-hand side of the screen. First one being apprentices. Many of you who engage or employ apprentice may know that you don't actually pay premium on apprentice wages. You still need to declare the wages, but that'll come off your premium calculation. But apprentices are definitely still covered under your policy, even though you're not paying premium for them. With regards to labour hire companies, if you're engaging a labour hire company and contracting staff in, that labour hire entity actually needs to take out a policy to cover those staff. So you don't pay premium on those wages to your labour hire staff, but you still need to provide a safe workplace, as you would for any employees that you engage. Casual or seasonal workers, whilst workers are not full-time and they're not permanent, they're still definitely covered under your policy, and you need to declare those wages as well. Now, the next one was actually one that was raised. We got lots of questions about work from home employees. A lot of people raised this question through the registration. Yeah, any of your workers that work from home or actually work anywhere, and some people travel for work, they might go from site to site, that type of thing. Well, those employees are always covered whilst they're working for you. And whilst it can be difficult, you still need to ensure you're providing a safe workplace or work site for those employees, regardless of where they are, and as best as you can. And the last one there is working directors. If you are a director of your own company, a proprietor limited company, and you're working day to day in that business and you're getting paid some form of payment or some sort of payment for the work performed, then yeah, you need to declare those payments, and you are covered also by the policy as a working director. With regards to who isn't a worker, there's only one category really there that we're covering off on, is volunteers. Volunteers aren't recognised under the legislation. You can take out volunteer insurance, specialty volunteer insurance through an insurance company. If you do pay your volunteer something to the value of $10 or more, you need to declare that, and that volunteer is also covered under the policy. Now, the last two categories I've got under might be workers are a little more complex, and we're not going to get into any detail, but with regards to interstate workers, we're going to provide you, there's going to be a link after this webinar to a resource called the State of Connection rules, which covers off on different examples of who may be covered when traveling interstate and what you need to do. Its most simple form: if your employees normally work in New South Wales and you cross a border for a temporary period of up to 6 months, then it would be likely that they're covered still under the New South Wales legislation. But again, this is on a case-by-case basis, and we'll send you that guideline. Contractors is probably one of the most asked questions we get. Sometimes a deemed work, sometimes a contractor might be a deemed worker, and many employers think that if one of their staff is a sole trader and have an ABN number, that they would be a true contractor. This is not necessarily the case. There are a number of control tests that can show that if you have someone working under your control, if they've got an ABN number, they still may be a deemed worker under the legislation. And again, we're going to send you some more information about that. If you have any questions about the different categories of workers, we always encourage you to contact our underwriting team on 134422, because generally it's a case-by-case example for each of these different categories of workers. So Adam, I've just covered off on the difference between different workers and different employer categories, but do you want to now explain different premium categories for us?
Yeah, thanks, Hux. There's this is really important to understand where you sit, and you'll understand a bit more why in a moment. But there are three main categories for employers based on employers' average performance premium. You can see there we've got the small employer, the experience-rated employer, and the loss prevention recovery model. The vast majority of customers sit in our small employer space or category. And to determine an employer's premium category, we need to work out the employer's average performance premium, which we simply get by just multiplying the wages by the industry rate. And we'll go into a bit more detail in a moment in regard to providing an example in how that works. So to define what a small employer is, these are the employers whose average performance premium is $30,000 or below, and are not part of a group of policies that exceeds $30,000 in group average performance premium. And in saying that, we mean you might have a smaller business that's associated with some larger organizations. And if that's the case and the group premium is over $30,000, it wouldn't be deemed a small employer under the categories we're talking about. So, as I said, it's about 93% of policies are small business policies, and that equates to somewhere over 300,000 policies within our scheme that would sit in a small business space. So the vast majority of policies sit there. And I'm going to bust a myth here, Hux, also, and highlight that a small employer's policy is not subject to adjustment as a result of any claim unless that employer's average performance premium exceeds $30,000. And this is another question we do get a lot at a lot of our forums, and that is small employers do worry that there'll be penalties and fines and premium impacts should they declare claims. And that is a myth. And you should absolutely declare claims, and we'll go into again a bit more of the information shortly as to why that's important. So reinforce also that the medium-sized employers, the experience-rated customers, I should say, are employers who pay above $30,000 in premium. The main difference with the medium, the experience rate, I should say, the experience rated customer, is that these have up to a year's worth of claims experience may be used in the calculation of your premium. So again, it works slightly differently, and it's something that you need to be aware of. And the main objective in this space is obviously to return your injured workers into the workplace as safely as soon as possible, as per GP certification. We always encourage employers to contact one of our underwriters to discuss their own individual policy on the number that Hux mentioned earlier, 134422. But you'll also note with all these categories, there's also an excess that's payable if a claim is not reported within 5 days. So the excess is an incentive for early reporting of injury. And again, we're going to get into a bit more detail in regard to why it's important that we are reporting claims early soon. We're also going to be hosting several webinars in June to explain the premium calculation in more detail for both small and experience rated employers. There'll be separate webinars for both, and we'll pass on the details of those at the end of this session. So Hux, we've mentioned the industry or WIC rate a couple of times now. Can you explain how this works?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. This is one of the most common questions that we do get, how the workers' compensation industry rates, or the WIC rates, as we refer to them, are applied to each policy. And we often get asked, why doesn't a different rate apply for each individual in a business, as the job tasks and therefore the risks, would vary in a workplace from person to person. For example, a small mechanic workshop probably have mechanics on the tools, repairing cars and the like, but also some administration staff, probably not lifting much more than a pen or maybe the phone. We don't apply a different rate to the administration staff when compared to the mechanics in the business, as each business is assessed based on the industry it is involved in. When we apply a rate to a business, we look at the purpose of that business and we consider what does it exist to do. Therefore, the classification applied to the business is the one that most accurately describes the entire business of the employer, and we use the same principle to every business in New South Wales. Using the example on the screen, those pictures on the screen, you can see this is let's say a plastic bottle manufacturing business. We have cleaners, we have factory workers, machinery operators, we have admin staff and warehouse workers as well. But when we assess which rate to apply, we would apply the rate for bottle manufacturing, as this is why the business does exist. I'm just going to add in a final point about the rate charged to each industry, Adam, and that is the performance of a single employer in every category indirectly impact the overall rate that is charged to all employers in the same category based on an employer's performance. When we talk about performance, we're referring to the claims ratio to wages and premium charged. So therefore, if enough employees in a single category perform better over time, then this can impact the overall rate that is charged. All right, Adam, so why don't you introduce our mate Rick, who owns a restaurant, and I'll change the slide, and you can explain how we calculate his premium.
Thanks, Hux. This is Rick, everyone. And looking at the calculation in the most simplistic way and applying simple mathematics, as we mentioned earlier, you take your annual salary and apply your WIC rate percentage. So you can see here that Rick's annual bill was $1 million. His WIC rate for cafes and restaurants is 2.2%. So his average premium is $22,000. And it's actually that simple for us to be able to obtain his average performance premium. But I also want to mention the premium savings that is available for most employers. And that is, if you can pay your premium in full by the due date, excuse me, then a smaller employer can receive a 5% discount. And if you're an experience rated employer, you can receive a 3% discount. However, we appreciate that it's not always possible. And in that case, you can pay by monthly installments and no extra costs. And you won't be, however, I should say, you won't be receiving a discount. So Hux, again, we've just explained the basics of the premium calculation. Why don't you now run the audience through the renewal and policy cycle and the importance of declaring wages on time?
Yeah, great. So look, there's a few things policyholders should understand, with regards to the declaration of wages and that policy renewal cycle and process. First of all, each year the policy is renewed on an estimate of wages because no one really knows. How would you know how much you're going to pay in wages to all your staff in the upcoming 12-month period? Then at the end of the policy year, the employer must declare the true and actual wages paid in a wages declaration online. Now, this is an obligation for all employers, and it's really important for a number of reasons. And these include, by submitting your wages declaration, means you're actually paying a fair and accurate premium. And if you fail to submit your declaration of wages on time, you may actually receive a 30% loading on your following year's renewal premium. And no one wants to pay more than they should. Employees actually have 4 months to complete that wages declaration after the expiry of the policy. So it should be plenty of time there. We're also going to share a link to the wages definition manual, which provides guidance on assessable wages and covers on what should and what shouldn't be included in your wages declaration. This wages declaration manual also provides more information about some of those, more complex areas like how to treat working directors and contractors and family trusts, like we spoke about earlier in the session. Just to name a few, it covers off on pretty much every category that you possibly can. It also reference to apprentice wages. You need to declare those wages on the form. There is a separate box for that, for apprentice wages. Make sure you do that on the online form to receive the discount, and that'll be removed from your final premium charged. Look, as always, should you need support or assistance through this process, it's best to call that number we've mentioned a few times, 13 44 22. Well, Adam, I think we've covered off on the policy cycle for now. So let's talk about what employers need to do if one of their workers is injured in the workplace. Why don't you explain what employers need to do should they experience a workplace injury?
Okay, thanks, Hux. We've created this simple diagram, and I suppose starting with the primary focus here on the care factor and early intervention. All the analysis and research clearly shows that early intervention maximises a worker's recovery and minimises the business impacts. And we therefore promote that employers be involved as much as possible, as you know your business and workforce better than anyone else. So if you step through some of these points that we have here, and you might hear different timeframes over time, and I know there can be confusion when you hear 48 hours and 5 days, etc., in regard to what timeframes do I need to meet. To put it simply, every employer within our state has a legislative requirement to notify of an injury within 48 hours of being notified of that workplace injury. And the notification will work from the time, as I said, that the injured worker notifies their manager and or supervisor that they've had that injury in the workplace. It's not from when the date of injury occurred, because sometimes there can be delays in a worker reporting an injury in that instance. We then move into the 5-day time frame, and so similar type thing is 5 days from when the worker makes the employer or supervisor aware of the injury. We have the excess exemption apply. If you report within 5 days, you don't get charged an excess. If you report outside of 5 days, you will be charged an excess. The excess is equivalent to a week's wages. So simply put, if it's $1,000 a week wage, that will be charged in your excess. So you can either have it in your pocket or it can go to icare, dependent upon if you report that claim within 5 days of notification or not. And the reason for that, again, and I mentioned earlier, is that early intervention piece. And Hux will provide a bit more detail in a moment in regard to what truly means to business based on the analysis that we've collected over time. So the third step here is where the worker will receive treatment. We always request that an employer supports that worker through the process and, if possible, even attend GP appointments in particular, specialist and other treatment needs. It's more about allowing the worker to take some time to get that treatment and care that they require to support them with their return to work. We'll always ask the employees to participate in the development of a return to work program or plan. And you may also get the support and assistance of a rehabilitation provider in that space. So that's all dependent upon your experience in workers' compensation. If you don't have the confidence to be able to support a worker with, one, identifying suitable duties, and two, returning the worker via a return to work program, then my absolute recommendation would be that you speak to your claim service provider and you get the support of a rehabilitation provider to assist you through that process. We also talked step 5 there about minimizing the productivity impacts. So the early intervention also supports those other indirect business impacts that you may have, particularly around service delivery. If you are a small business, you take a person away, and that puts a lot of stress and strain on everyone else within the business, whilst we don't want to also be rushing people back to work. And then the final point there, the point 6, is where we want to create that supportive workplace culture. But one thing that we could be better at is doing a bit of a risk analysis insofar as why injury occurs. And then that we can look at eliminating business or eliminating those type of injuries happening again, so that we don't injure our workers in the future. Just part of the work health and safety program that you may implement internally. We do have some checklists available that do relate to should you experience a physical and or a psychological injury in your workplace. So we will send the link to those post this email also. So Hux, now I've spoken about these benefits of early reporting. Can we share some of the stats that support these messages?
Yeah, let's do that. So the data on the screen shows us that reporting a claim within 5 days can result in much quicker return to work and therefore a much lesser impact on your business's productivity than those claims reported outside of the 5 days. As you can see on the dial, only 59% of claims are reported within 5 days for New South Wales businesses. And these delays just may be a result of, maybe employers not knowing what to do, or perhaps fearful of a premium increase or perhaps a fine. But looking at the stats, claims reported within 5 days, the average days off is 64 days. It's still pretty significant. And the average claims cost is $33,000. But when you look at those reported outside of 5 days, the average days off is more than double at 140 days with a claims cost of $58,000. So big difference here between under 5 days and over 5 days. Report your claim within those 5 days. And on average, you'll save 76 days in days off for the claim. Claims will be $25,000 cheaper on average. And it'll save you from paying that excess that Adam has referred to, a couple of times there. So, look, in addition, there's also the indirect impact on your industry or your WIC rate, as claims costs impact every employer's performance and therefore impact on the rate charged that we were talking about earlier on. So many reasons to report a claim as soon as you possibly can and be as proactive as you possibly can. Now, Adam, we've spoken about savings as a result of the early reporting of a claim in terms of productivity, but there are a number of other incentives out there and rebates as well that are available for New South Wales businesses to access and through different means. we'll just talk about one, which is the Safe Work Small Business Rebate. So what is it and how do employers obtain this one?
Thanks, Alex. Yeah. So the safe work rebate for small employers, and we'll clarify that because there is a slight shift from what icare defines as small employer to what safe work does in a moment. But it's a program that offers up to $1,000 toward the cost of workplace health and safety items. So essentially, if you invest in any, and most business does, I know, of the eligible items for safety, you can claim reimbursement. It has a vast amount of safety items that are included that you can purchase and seek the rebate of up to $1,000 if you meet the criteria. So as I mentioned, whilst we've been talking about small business and the icare criteria being based on a premium amount of $30,000 or less, you'll note here that the definition applies for a business that has less than 50 full-time employees. So that's a bit of a different definition there. So if you do fit that category, so whilst it does state small business, you might be more than $30,000 premium, but you have less than 50 full-time employees, you may be eligible for this rebate. So there are some other items and conditions and eligibility criteria, but ultimately the program objective is to help business purchase safety items to improve the work, health and safety for you and your workers. So Hux, there's some other examples I think you were going to run through quickly.
Yeah, just to give people on the call a bit of an idea of the type of things that are available. You can see there's just 8 examples there. Even things from sun exposure, different types of equipment to help you stop you from falling from a height, all types of things. It's all available on the Safe Work webpage, which we're going to send you a link to all this information as well in that email that we've referenced now a couple of times. But a real broad spectrum of things are available, which is really great to see that rebate up to $1,000. Look, we're nearly at the end, Adam, and look, before we finish up, why don't you share some detail about an important resource that we have available to support employers?
Okay, thanks, Hux. Hux. The icare Small Business Hub is a tool that we created and as a one-stop shop. And whilst we do, it's titled the icare Small Business Hub. It's actually relevant to any business who probably has lesser experience in workers' compensation. Ultimately, it was created as a one-stop shop. So as opposed to you having to search the web and or the icare web page and other web pages, what we've done is we've pulled a lot of the information together and put it in this hub to make it easier for people, employers particularly, to be able to access information. And that may relate to your premium, your claims, education events similar to what you're attending today, which we'll also do face events in certain regions, prevention resources, and a lot more information. So have a look, and it may be useful to you and your business. And there's also a chat function in there, so you can chat to an underwriter if that's required.
Well, that just about brings us to the end of the session, Adam. So I hope we cleared up a few things for employers in New South Wales and what they need to know about workers' compensation and their policy, and what to do after a workplace injury. And hopefully we've busted a few of those myths and found some ways to save employers money. Now, before we go, we just want to, we're just going to turn the chat back on and want to obtain feedback about what everyone thought of the session. And we'd like to keep these sessions, on point, not too long. I mean, what's your feedback about what you thought? So we're just going to ask one single question about which should pop up on the screen. There it is now. What you thought of the session. If you thought it was good and you got something out of it and you'd like to see more of it, you'd probably give it a 4 or a 5. If it was just a so-so session, you'd give it a 3. If it was a waste of time, then you'd give it a 1 or a 2. But also, please pop in the chat what you thought of the session, or after any feedback, but also suggestions for future sessions. We're really keen to hear your thoughts on what else you'd like to hear from us. Now, while you do that, On the screen, you can see some information about our upcoming events. Adam referenced we do face-to-face and we do more webinars. We've got a number of face-to-face sessions coming up. We've got one there in Parramatta at the end of the month around minimising the impact of complex injuries. Then we have a number of breakfast or toast and talk sessions, especially for small businesses in New South Wales. We have 3 of them in May, up in Tweed Heads and Lismore, and then one in the Blue Mountains as well throughout May. Now, in June, we have a number of premium sessions, which are all going to be webinars very similar to this. And we've got one on the 4th of June and a couple on the 18th of June, depending on category you fall into. All this information is being sent out, but you can actually access and register for any of our upcoming sessions via the QR code that's on the screen. Well, I can see something that's come up about this slide pack. You are going to get a copy of the slide pack. We're going to send you an email, the slide pack, along with all the resources that we've referenced through the session, and that'll come out in the next day or so. The session was recorded and will be available on our webpage as well in about sort of 2 to 3 weeks' time when it's ready and available. Adam, thank you for your time again today. It was really great. I think it was a really good session, and hopefully the New South Wales employers on the call receive some good information and will help them with their business and what to do with regards to their policy premium, and of course, should they have a workplace injury. So thanks everyone. Hopefully we can see you at a session again in the future, face-to-face or on a webinar.
I'll just answer one question I saw just run through there, Hux. 5 business days or 5 calendar days. It's 5 calendar days. Whoever sent that through. And there's a lot of questions and information coming through. Thank you very much, guys. This is the first time I've actually run this session for new business, and we hope to develop it moving forward. And that's why your feedback's really important. But we can see that there's a few comments coming through and some support requirements there. So we'll do our best to get to whatever we can and provide you with the responses.
Cool. All right, thanks everyone. I'm going to pop the music back on. A few hits from the 90s. Takes me back to my childhood or my teenage years anyway. Thanks, Adam. And I'll hopefully we'll catch everyone again soon. All right.
Thanks, Hux. Thanks all.